Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. Today we are concluding with a 5-part study on the life of Christ at 12, where we've learned about the it factor, and we're going to pick up with the last part, Luke 2:50. But they did not understand the statement which he had spoken to them. Then he went down with them, came to Nazareth, and was subject to them. Jesus increased in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and men. First, we see this. Not everybody's going to understand you when you prioritize your life around the it factor. The priorities for your walk with God, the priorities of serving Christ inside of your marriage, raising kids in a godly way, values that you have for building your company. Not everybody is going to understand it. You want a miserable life? Try to make everybody happy. Try to please everybody. I like the quote, "I don't know the secret to success, but I do know the secret to failure is trying to please everybody." John F. Kennedy said, 20% of the people are always mad. Isn't that true? There's just 20% of the people out there, they don't like you no matter what you did, and you're probably never going to make them happy. Don't spend 80% of your time trying to make the 20% of miserable people happy. It's just a waste of time. And we never see Jesus doing that. So don't get caught up into that trap. Not everybody's going to understand you. Now, as you're onboarding staff, as you're onboarding your team, we said earlier in a lesson that they all kind of tend to come with their own agenda. They're coming with their own set of core values, their own way of this is how we think things should be done. And it is your responsibility to ingrain them into your culture. We see Jesus take 3.5 years to integrate his culture inside of his leadership team, the 12 apostles, then 11 apostles, and then he added, who I believe Paul, who would be the replacement, or Matthias, different opinions there. But either way, Jesus built his leadership team, and he took time to teach them, train them, and help them get in alignment with his vision and his values. And there's different ways that you can do that. Something that we've implemented here at Element Church that we really have been enjoying is we created a designated room. We call it the War Room because we are in a spiritual battle. And so when you go into a battle, there is a general's tent where they're meeting with their teams and they're strategizing, and they got visuals and they know where everything is going on. And we take church very seriously because eternal souls are at stake. We are in a spiritual battle. So we call this our war room because we're not playing to play. We're not playing just for fun. We're playing to win because eternities are at stake. And so what we've done inside of our culture, and it's no right or wrong formula, this is just what works inside of our rhythm. And we take 2 hours in the afternoons between 2 and 4. Every staff member is required to block that 2-hour window off to be available to attend that time. We've implemented OKRs, which is objectives by key results. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in future lessons, but objective by key results. Also project management, so we have project management review. And so we built our whole room to really be visually integrated around this, and we're still fleshing out some things, and it's just going to be, it's my favorite room in the whole church, okay? And so we have a big smart screen TV. You can touch it. You can move slides around. You can draw on it. And we have whiteboards. We have a project management board that it's a magnetic board. And we got the idea from a great Christian owned business here in St. Louis area called Cosmo. They've been very gracious to us. Great leaders there. And so we actually got inspired from them and took this and integrated a lot of it into our own room. And so it's a project management board. You got visual cards. You can see, who are the project owners, the teams, and you can see the 7 different lanes that a project should be moving down, and it's all visual. And so the teams have to give it updates bi-weekly, and we can see where we're at, and nobody can hide. It's a football field, and you know where every player is on the field, and you know where the ball has been fumbled. You know who's out of bounds, who's out in the snack bar when they should be on the field. It's awesome. Love it. Anyway, that's our war room. And here's what we do inside of that war room. We train our staff. We'll go over mission. We go over values. We go over all the things that matter to us. Hey, here's how we take care of people inside of our church. Here's how we, do guest process. And we're all coming in alignment. You may be seen The Mandalorian. What a great show, Mandalorian. And I love the statement, this is the way. This is the way. Well, I've just adopted that and stolen it. And Element, this is the way. So we go in there and we just go, this is the way. Element does this. This is the way. Element does that. Yeah, but no, that's great. You may have done that where you came from. 50 other places may be doing that. That's great. But this is the way. And we just have a way that we do it. Now, we're always fine-tuning. There's always room for improvement. We're not married to methods. We're married to Jesus, and we're married to his word. But we guard the values, and we guard that very closely. So have a way that you're integrating the culture, the DNA, this is the way we do this. This is how we do customer service, whatever it is, and you build a system to onboard and integrate that into your new staff. Now, everybody gets mission drift. Just because you did it at orientation doesn't mean they remember it 5 years later. This is something that you have to continually go back and continually review with your team. When was the last time you did an all-employee review of the HR manual? I know, it's boring and it is phenomenal sleep aid material, but you know what? A lot of the problems you have inside of your team is because nobody's reviewed that manual in the last 50 years. Hey, my question is this: has your HR department reviewed it in the last 50 years? Because half of it's probably outdated. And so many of the frustrations that we have as business leaders, church leaders, is because we aren't continually staying on top of this is the way. So keep on top of this is the way. Keep it in front of your team. Keep it in front of your people. And so there you go. And I just want to kind of wrap it up with this little thought. God uses imperfect leaders to perfect us. Look, they didn't understand the way that Jesus needed to do things. I must be about my Father's business. They didn't get it. And I find this interesting. Jesus was subject to them, even though he knew more about the subject than them. And Jesus was the subject, and he still submitted to his mom and dad. So he still submitted to authority. And there's really nothing that reveals the character of a person more than how they can submit to a leader who isn't perfect, which is every leader. Look, if you get close enough to see the flaws of your leader, cover their leader's flaws, love that leader, pray for that leader, and just know that it's a privilege to see your leader's weaknesses. And you know what? You're there because they know they had those weaknesses and they brought you on to cover those weaknesses. The things you see that are the weakest things inside of your leader, the reason you see that they're the weakest things is they're probably because they're your strongest things. But that's why you're there. You're there to cover their strengths. Every smart leader hires for their weakness. But here's the mistake I've seen with insecure leaders over the years. I have certain weaknesses, certain things I'm not really good at as a leader, and I get that. And so I hire people who have greater capacity in those areas. And what they'll do is they'll look at their strength and judge their strength against my weakness. And I go, well, that's not fair, and that's dumb, because that's why I hired you. I know I had that weakness. What they never do is compare their weakness against my strength, because my strength was a whole lot greater than their weakness, and vice versa. Look, why don't we just stop comparing and go, thank God we complement one another. And so Jesus still had the ability to submit to authority who wasn't perfect, who didn't understand, and he still followed them, and he did a great job with it. And what was the byproduct of following an imperfect leader? Jesus increased in wisdom, he increased in stature, and in favor with God and man. You can learn from every leader that you follow. And also, you can be a compliment and a gift to that leader you follow by bringing your strengths to help cover their weakness. All right, see you in our next All Out Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.